Hawk is a screenwriter who has worked on films such as Iron Man, Children of Men, Cowboys and Aliens, and the upcoming TV series The Expanse. Did I miss anything?
No.
Okay.
That's about it.
He is currently doing a little bit of work with the second season of The Expanse, or at least their groundwork for it. And we're just going to chat and see where it goes. So, hello.
Hello.
And can you guys hear us? Okay. Yep. Okay. If you guys want to close the door, if you just want to close the door, just so we don't have any ambient noise going in, that'd be great.
Ambiance.
So, how do you describe what you do? I mean, a screenwriter, but like you've done a bunch of different things for TV shows and for the films you've worked on. So, how do you, when someone asks you what you do, what do you do?
I play pretend, drink a lot of wine. No, I mean, you tell stories. I mean, it's the most basic thing, but it's, screenwriting, I think, is very different from writing a novel. I have some novelist friends, and, in screenwriting, you're always really fighting the page count. You have 120 minutes, essentially 2 hours to tell your story, and so you can't wax on forever about where a table was made or get inside, the internal dialogue of characters, and so it's a bit of a different discipline. It's some people say it's more a craft than an art, but it's really both. And yeah, I mean that's what I do. Sometimes we're sent books and we read those and adapt them into movies. Other times it's comic books. Obviously, it could be anything, and we write our own stuff as well, where we have an idea, we read about something or something that really sticks with you, and you write it as a story. And then, of course, you have to go and get all the other elements in.
Yeah. So now, Iron Man, Children of Men Iron Man is the Marvel comic, and it's got a long history. Children of Men was the P.D. James novel.
Yeah.
Cowboys and Aliens was a graphic novel, and The Expanse is based on a book series by James S.A. Corey. You've worked extensively with adaptations. So how do you say you get a great book that you really like? What is the first thing you do to start getting it adapted with the intention of turning it into a TV show or a movie?
Well, each one is very different. In the case of P.D. James, it was really sort of an impossible book to really adapt, and that's why it was kind of knocking around. It was early in our career, and often early in your career, you get all the broken pieces, all the sort of broken projects that come to you, and then you have to kind of figure it out, and you're cheap and available, and so that's the kind of stuff that you get on your plate, and it's actually great because it really teaches you a lot about trying to how do you sort of get something that's impossible on from a novel into something that can be filmed as a movie. So that was really the case with Children of Men. Somebody had written a script of it, and it had not gone forward, and then they sent us the book, and we just saw it as Casablanca set in the future, and a movie very dear to us, and that sort of became the kernel that solved it as a way to get the book into a filmable form. And with that one, it's strange because there was many writing teams on that, and all the writing teams that came on after us really brought different things and made it better and better. And so that's a very rare thing, because usually the more people you have on a project, the more the vision gets diluted, and it sort of becomes this mush. And it's very rare that several writers make something better, and this was definitely one of those cases. With The Expanse, that's a series of books. I think the third one hit the New York Times bestseller. And with that one, the hard part is there's so much great stuff in those books. And how do you transfer that, capture that amazingly rich world that these guys wrote into a 42-minute episode by episode kind of season, 10-episode season? So that was really the challenge in that one. It was an embarrassment of riches, and you really don't want to lose anything, and you're trying to cram everything in, but it can't all survive in a show. So you have to get a little inventive with structure. You have to really try and pull out the parts that kind of speak to a larger, the larger world and story, and make it feel like the books. And that's always what you kind of try to do in adaptation. You can never sort of do a straight-to-straight adaptation, but you try to capture the feeling of a novel, or in this case, the Expanse novels. And they're very. The interesting thing about these books, I think, more than a lot of things that we've been handed in our careers, is they're so complete. They're incredible. You can drill down into any single part of their story, and it's there for a reason. It's a sci-fi story, but it really is about human beings. It's not about cool tech. It's not about just the Gorbs fighting orbs on the planet Amorph. I mean, it's really about people 200 years in the future, and how we sort of, humanity packs for the stars and brings along all their problems, but now on a much bigger scale. So that's the first thing that really struck us with that novel, was how amazing it was. And I didn't even want to read the book. When I first saw the cover, I went, I know what this book is going to be, and I don't want to read it. And Mark kept saying, look, there's a meeting on Wednesday, you have to read this book. And so the night before, I cracked it open, and I finished it in one sitting. And I just remember screaming on the phone, "Get that meeting!" You know.
And this is a long book. It's not a
it's
not
pretty,
short. It's
it's
like 500
hefty.
pages.
Yeah.
And each one of them is 500 pages. Mark, for those of you who don't know, is your writing partner.
Indeed.
But he's not from Vermont. He's
Mark is actually
LA.
from New York originally. We both met while working in the city at Showtime. You know, we were doing menial jobs there, and somebody introduced us, and we were both sort of writing separately. And you know, we just kind of started reading each other's stuff and giving each other comments, and that sort of grew into this relationship. That's now been 20 years, maybe more.
Now, how do you guys work together? Do you write a bit and then?
You know, we
hand
have a
off,
very
or?
strange, I think, for writing teams, way of working, because a lot of the teams that we know kind of sit across from each other with the computers set up and shoot dialogue back and forth. And we never worked that way. Even when we lived a block apart in New York, we never saw each other. So it's not that we don't like each other. We just, you know, Mark's kind of a bit of a hermit, and you know, we have very different skills and very different personalities. But when you put it together, you know, it sort of created something that was much better than writing separately. But he lives in Los Angeles. I live over here in Vermont, and you know, as I said, we've never really sat in a room together. So our process really is we talk for hours on the phone now and build something, you know, build an outline, and then I'll take that outline and just try to vomit it out. I'll try and write as quickly as possible, and just get it down. You know, try not to be an editor and a writer at the same time. And then when I'm done and exhausted, I send that over to him, and then he does his thing on it, and it comes back. You know, what was an elephant now comes back as a much sleeker animal, and then we just go back and forth until there's a handful of things that we both disagree on, and then we'll just argue them out.
Let's step back a little bit in your career to Iron Man. What made you settle on the particular story that ended up on the screen, or what was your role in writing that screenplay?
Well, you know, it's funny. We were, though Mark and I like comic books, we were never sort of the diehard fans who could tell you what happens in issue 5 of, you know, so and so. But we had done John Carter of Mars with Jon Favreau, and it was clear that movie was not going to go at Paramount, and so John immediately went over to Iron Man, where Avi Arad, who was the producer, had been trying to lure him for some time, and so he brought us along, and the first thing they did was send us the massive entire collected works of Iron Man through the Times, and it was quite a hefty Bible. And so, you know, we just, in there is the Warren Ellis depiction of or whatever, his take on Iron Man, and that was really what kind of cemented it a little bit for us in terms of look and where it was going to go. But it really was, you know, Marvel is very protective and really loves their characters, and they were saying, look, you know, these are the things that we want to have in it. And at the time, it was a little bit, the Mandarin was the original villain, and it was incredibly difficult because the Mandarin and Tony are never in the same place. And so we had this crazy story, and finally, towards the end, they said, look, get rid of the Mandarin and just, you know, let Ba Baaa be the villain, and suddenly we had this kind of mentor relationship that, you know, that you see in the movie now with Jeff Bridges. And
now, did you have any idea that Iron Man would become the start to the whole cinematic universe, and
No.
it would grow into this massive thing that it is now?
No, I remember our agents calling us up and going, this Iron Man thing, is this going to work out? I mean, is this going to be good, or are we going to be embarrassed? Do we have to, like, you know, sweep this under the rug? And we go, no, it seems like it's really good. I think this could work out. And you know, I will tell you, looking at the rough cut of Iron Man was very scary, because we were coming out in a summer where Transformers had debuted to huge, you know, whatever, box office acclaim, and there was National Treasure 2, and they were so action-packed that when we looked at the rough cut, it just felt that we were going to come out and sort of fall flat, that we weren't giving the audience enough of this kind of adrenaline that they seemed to be, you know, craving. And it was very nice to, when it came out, and you know, people weren't missing the action. They were really caught up in the characters, and obviously, you know, Robert's performance and everybody else. So it was a big surprise, I think, certainly for us, that it you know, hit as big as it did.
What have you thought about have you seen the films since then, or?
Iron Man?
Yeah.
Yes.
Avengers?
I've seen Avengers, yes.
Would
I
you-
mean, very surprising to us to see, Iron Man was really a second-rate character in their stable. It was Captain America, it was... So the strange thing for us is to look at the poster for Avengers and see Iron Man, front and center. That was very bizarre, because
Yeah.
I don't think that's the way they thought it would go.
And sort of to tie that back with Children of Men is there was an article I read recently about how Children of Men is is a very relevant film all of a sudden for the migrant crisis that's going on in Europe.
Exactly.
And do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just mentioning that actually. It's very strange looking at the news, because it's really, in Children of Men, England is the only place that still has order, and everybody's trying to get there because the rest of the world's really collapsed. And that's why you have those Abu Ghraib scenes and all that stuff in the movie. It's everybody crushing their borders and them trying to get rid of them, and it's amazingly how sadly that's where we are.
Especially with some of the policies that England has been enacting.
Yeah.
Which is, so I guess we should have all watched it a little bit more and paid a little bit more attention.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I haven't seen it really brought up, but I wonder if it will be that people will say, "Hey, this seems familiar."
Yeah. Let's jump to the Expanse, because I know unless do you have anything you want to talk about with Cowboys and Aliens?
No.
I noticed that's dropped off a lot. I saw it. I actually
Yeah.
really had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, I was recently in Toronto, and somebody came running up and said, "Cowboys and Aliens," and I went, "Oh, okay." We don't often get that, but
No, I had a lot of fun
yeah.
with it. It was a
Yeah, I
kind
think
of a neat mashup.
I think people a little bit older have a more of a relationship to the Western. Like my kids couldn't give a damn. Like Western, what's that? Dusty, cow dung. They don't have that kind of nostalgic attachment to it that we did. But that was a strange movie. I will say it was an interesting process, because it was really Steven Spielberg and Ron Howard were sort of co-producing it, and they were trying to make sort of different movies. Steven wanted to make something that was a very fun popcorn summer movie, which really is what it should have been. With a title like Cowboys and Aliens, you're already halfway there. And Ron Howard wanted to do a much more serious sort of movie. It was a Western that aliens kind of showed up in. And so it was a bit of a tug back and forth about what it was going to be. And then eventually it got sort of very serious. I think maybe a little bit miscast in that you have, Daniel Craig is a grumpy guy in it, and Harrison Ford's a grumpy guy in it. And it's the side character is Sam Rockwell, so that's where the fun kind of comes in. But it just felt like it should have been more fun. A lot of the fun kind of got drubbed out of it.
I thought it was fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So now let's jump up to the Expanse, and for those of you who don't know, it is an ongoing book series by two gentlemen named Ty Frank and and Daniel Abraham, writing under the name James S. A. Corey. It takes place 200 years in the future, and it basically details the actions of these three factions of humanity. There's Earth, there's Mars, and then there's the Outer Belt. It's a little bit of a complicated story, and I don't want to give away too much. Over on Barnes & Noble, I wrote an article about how the Expanse came to be. If anybody wants to go check out, I'm not trying to be self-serving here or anything, but if you want some background on how that particular book series came about, and
I know it sounds very strange, but
apparently it's a
actually
highly
fits in.
smuggleable commodity, at least in the book
Highly
series.
prized in the future.
Yeah, so start stocking up, because maybe you'll
Yes.
appreciate. And it basically it has to do with this. There's this ice hauler who is traveling. It gets caught up in this conspiracy when his ship is blown up, and then there's a detective on Sirius Station who has to track down this missing girl. So you said you didn't like the book cover initially, and then you read it and you couldn't put it down. What attracted you to the world of the Expanse?
Well, in terms of the book cover, it's just so much of sci-fi I find is really tech heavy. The tech is really the star of the piece, and you just fall out of it after a few pages. And I've read a lot of those, and I thought this was going to be one of similar sort of story. And right away, it was about relatable people, and that's what Mark and I loved about it right away. It's space seen through the eyes of a truck driver and a beat cop on an asteroid station, and both of them trying sort of working on different ends of a giant conspiracy. And the world is just so incredibly rich and believable. You guys have seen Alien, the original, I assume. A lot of people in that movie, aside from the alien bursting out of the guy's chest, remark about Brett and Parker in the engine room. Do you remember those two guys? They were arguing about their contract, and it was so real. And here was sci-fi with just two guys doing exactly what they would be doing, which is arguing about how much their take is going to be and what they're going to get paid. And that sort of aesthetic and that feel is really sort of what the Expanse is. It's real people, and it's you have humanity now colonize Mars, and you have Earth, which is sort of like the, like England, and Mars is like the colonies, or maybe even a better comparison is to say that Earth is like the US and Mars is like China. It's this rising empire and this geopolitical conflict. And in between, you have belters. They're people who have lived so long in space that their bodies have physically transformed. They're elongated. They've lived in microgravity and spent a lot of time out there, and also died in the millions to bring humanity to the stars. And they can't even live on Earth anymore because of the gravity. And so it's almost like another race of people. They're not aliens. They're us, but several generations away. And so you have this great kind of geopolitical thing going on where they're trying to fight for their piece of the pie, and you have Earth trying to hold on to its share of the power, and you have Mars kind of rising up. And so into this comes this crazy conspiracy that threatens to get all these sides to essentially kill each other and start this war that's going to end everything. And so we just follow these two guys, and Avasarala, who is kind of our eyes or window into Earth, and she is the third highest ranking official on Earth, which is now controlled by the UN. And so, it's geopolitical stuff, it's personal stuff, but it's very real. It really feels like kind of where we're going. And as a theme, it's interesting with these books, because you look at the Earth, the world today, and you see, you have ISIS, people getting beheaded. It's sort of, you have Putin rising in Russia, and it's all the sort of the same kind of, it feels like we've been here before. When you're 49 years old, you have a bit of perspective, and you go, we've done this before. And we seem to be caught in this kind of endless cycle where we can't get out of our own way. We can't sort of evolve to something new. And one of the themes that really struck us about this was this idea that until we conquer the darkness in our own heart, we can't conquer the darkness out there. And that's really one of the sort of at least the way I like to look at it, as struggling to kind of find a new way for humanity. And it's very heady, but it's sort of, we never get into speeches like that, which I also like. There's nobody in a shiny uniform on a bridge of a spaceship saying what I just said. So.
One of the things I've appreciated about the books is it's also about the limitations of humanity. Like our brains cannot process the vast distances of space. We sort of have to approximate, and a lot of the books cover what do we do in that absence? Like how do we sort of jump those gaps? And this one's very much about
it's really
biology versus what is actually out there. What are we living?
Yeah, I mean everything has a consequence there. Going fast in space really has a consequence. You need to take this cocktail that's actually in the seats of your spaceship that injects you with this stuff that allows you to take on heavy gravity and the acceleration of the ships. So everything has a consequence there. You don't just flick a switch and fire yourself to the other side of the universe. I mean that's the realism of it was something that really stuck with us. We deal with gravity. When you stop the ship, everything starts floating.
3D sex scenes?
Yes.
Has anybody out here actually read the books? Show of hands.
Uh-huh.
So just a handful. I do recommend them. They're really quite a lot of fun. There's 5 of them, and for those of you who are worried about long books being released in a series, they are coming out once a year, so we don't have to worry about the George R.R. Martin effect.
Yes.
So and they've given you enough material to go for a while, as long as the TV show.
Yeah, there's a lot of material. They're book 5. They write a book a year. These guys are extremely annoying because they seem to write a novel in a weekend, which drives you nuts. They're very prolific, and they really are. Just great, fun books. I mean, they click by. It's not heavy, sci-fi. It's really. I think you'd like them even if you're not a sci-fi fan. I think my mother would have loved these books. She was a kind of a literary.
Yeah. How are we doing for time? Just want to just be cognizant of what we got. So we're about halfway through. A couple more questions, and we'll do something in a minute. What is your favorite moment from the series so far? Now that you guys have finished filming.
There's a lot. Funny, somebody just asked me this, and I was stumped then too. I will just say something that happens at the end of episode 1. I won't delve into that.
And you guys are starting to work on a season 2.
Yes, we're starting on season 2, and obviously we have a lot of material. So as I said, they're up to book 5 now, and they're writing book 6. So there is plenty of material to draw from, and it gets better and better, which is really nice. You know, reading the second book I thought was even better than the first book.
Have you read all the books so far?
Not all.
Okay.
No.
Oh, you're in for a treat. I'm up to book 5.
Yes, so I've heard.
Want to hear what happens?
I hope I get to read soon.
Do you want to hear what happens?
No.
Oh, okay. Do you know what happens in book 6 yet? I'm dying to get
no,
there.
all they told me was Earth gets really...
Yeah, I'm waiting. I keep waiting for some stuff. I keep waiting for more hints of book 6. They just announced the 6th book, so I'm just kind of waiting for June to roll around. The book's released in June, and the latest one is... what was the latest one? Who's been reading the books? What's the latest book? I'm drawing a blank.
The name of the book?
Yeah.
Oh, the latest one is
Yeah.
Games, Nemesis Games.
Nemesis Games, that's it.
Yeah.
So, all right, so that was just out. So you brought a friend too, didn't you?
I did.
Okay. How much did you guys? Who here has seen Jurassic World? Anybody excited for Star Wars 9? You guys want to talk to Colin Trevorrow?
All right, come on up here, Mr. Collins.
What up?
So, without exaggeration, this man is the king of Hollywood. Yes, he is. An amazing director, incredible writer.
Hello.
How's it going?
It's good. Mind if I
see.
use this mic? Do you have a mic or?
No,
That'd
I'll
be
just,
cool.
I'll just shout.
Shout, you can use this.
All right. What's going on? I live here in Vermont, so I thought I would stop by.
Indeed, yes.
So now we've turned into the Vermont professionals panel with me accepted. But so what is? You guys are both working in Hollywood. How do you navigate the Vermont to LA commute? Is it a lot of tolls on the way, or?
Well, listen, I think for a writer, it's a little bit easier because Mark is there, and you know, when you have a few credits, you don't always have to be in the room if it's something big. I do remember when we were working in Cowboys and Aliens, though. I just left for vacation, Cape Cod, with the family, and I'd gotten there, and the phone rang. They said, "Hey, Stephen wants to have a meeting on Thursday. This is Tuesday." And I go, "Oh, well, I'm in Cape Cod," and they're like, "Great, we'll see you Thursday." So. So, you know, those you come out for and you don't want to miss. But generally, you know, Mark is there and he goes into the meetings. But I imagine, you know, as a director, it's a little tougher.
Yeah, it gets tougher. I had the same situation that you guys did. My writing partner, Derek Connolly, lives in Los Angeles. And we actually write pretty much the same way you guys do. You know, we're separate. We don't have like, you know, dueling typewriters in a room. But once I started directing it became a lot more difficult, and my family and I have been traveling all over. We lived in Hawaii, and then we lived in New Orleans, and then we were in Los Angeles last year, and now I'm back here for a year because I'm doing a film in New York that we're actually going to cut here. Where my whole editing room is setting up right now here in Burlington to edit this film, and then we're going to move on ultimately to London to do Star Wars. So I won't be in Vermont that much longer, and it makes us sad. We've been here for about 8 years.
That is sad.
Actually, I was sort of hoping that Star Wars 9 would be filmed here in the Green Mountains. I guess that's the case.
Maybe
we could do a really good version of Endor.
Maybe the Wookiees.
Okay. It's a tax break issue. That's really the only thing.
So some members of the Northeast Kingdom would be some pretty disreputable folks.
Yeah.
So
Scum and villainy.
so you just came off of Jurassic World, which did pretty well.
There was some interest in the dinosaurs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
who would have thought dinosaurs would be popular? But that's actually kind of something I've been wondering is because Jurassic Park, the last film came out a whole bunch of years ago, and you're sort of looking at rebooting a franchise that's been out of the public consciousness. So do you think it's just that dinosaurs are sort of an ever popular thing, or do you think there's something something that really touched, you know, that people really wanted to see them again?
I think it's both. I think, you know, everyone has this very natural, instinctive dinosaur phase that they go through. You know, boy or girl, at like 3, 4, you look at those creatures and you say, I want to know more about that. And I've always had a theory that you could put a bunch of monsters on a table and then mix a dinosaur in and then a bunch more monsters, and a child would still point at the dinosaur and say, teach me about this. And I think that, you know, part of it could be in our DNA. There could be something that knows that those creatures were here on Earth at some point, which is part of what fascinates us. And I think, in addition to that, you know, we had a way to approach the film that people hadn't seen since the first movie. You know, the equation of that first movie was, you know, we're going to a place that's perfectly safe and you're going to be fine, and then surprise, you're going to die. And then the other ones where you're going someplace that you're probably going to die, and then sure enough you do. And so this one we got to go back to that equation in the first movie, which I think is what makes it work as well as it does. And sometimes things just hit at a certain moment. There's so many things that go into the alchemy of a movie working on the level that it did, and I'm very, very happy and very pleased that people enjoyed it. We loved it.
It seemed like too that one thing you guys did that was so clever was what you said is how do you people are tired of dinosaurs or they've seen them more, but that is also in your script that it's sort of become a commonplace thing, and that was it sort of played into that, which I thought was really clever.
Yeah, that no one's impressed by a dinosaur
exactly
anymore.
You got a Tostito-Don, Pensasaurus. Those are brilliant.
I heard that one of the jumping off points that you guys had was basically a picture of a kid texting on his phone with a shadow of a dinosaur behind him.
Yes.
Is that sort of describe how you approached it?
That was with like a dinosaur through like protective glass, like on the other side. Yeah, we thought that there was certainly something to say about how we seem to get pretty rapidly bored by everything, all the new technology that comes out. Like keep entertaining me, show me something better. I don't this phone where I can talk to my grandmother in Italy and it goes through space. I'm not impressed. What's the next thing? And that we thought there was something to it, and also how the sort of the corporatization of all of our childhood dreams is like slowly sort of sucked some of the joy out of it, and that's why it's so great to come to things like this, because you see that we still do find the joy in this stuff, even though they're making 30 versions of each of these things and trying to make as much money as possible. It's still able to channel, we're able to channel like what we really love about Jedis and Wolverine and all this stuff, and we care about this stuff, and so it's nice that we've been able to find a balance and that it hasn't been completely made soulless.
I remember when you first told me that you were going to do this, and I remember being very scared for you. I thought, oh my God, you're going to go into this franchise, you're going to go into these people, you're going to, these are very, people who've been doing this for a long time, strong personalities, and I thought, Colin was going to get chewed up, as people often do. And it was amazing to meet you in the middle of that process, and you were absolutely totally calm, as if you strolled out of a spa, and it was very impressive. And what came out of it, I mean, to do what you've done is we do a 42-minute episode. That's difficult technically, just from a technical point of view. But to do that is inconceivable.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't like an intensely stressful situation beyond, but I say that, but then also like you look at my driver's license picture from 4 years ago and now, and I've like aged like a president. And so I think maybe there's something happening internally that I'm not acknowledging. But there was something I feel like I could, if I said to any of you, like, you tell me what a Jurassic Park movie is, there's this little kid inside that's very confident that'll say, oh, I'll tell you what a Jurassic Park movie is. Like, I know. And there was a little bit of that. There was channeling that little kid and finding that confidence of, I know this. I know how to tell this story because I grew up on this, and that's why we felt that we needed to write a new movie when we came in and build something from scratch that we could believe in. Because the very first thing that I said when I had the first meeting with Steven was, and in retrospect, it kind of shocks me that I said these things, but this is a verbatim quote. I was with him and Frank Marshall, and I said, look, if this movie fails, then the two of you will continue on to be legends, and I will disappear, forever. No one will ever hear from me again. And so if I'm going to do it, if it's bad, it has to be my fault. Like I have to be the one who is telling the story, and I have to build something that I can be proud of, because the only way that I'm willing to fail is if it was me. I can't have, I can't point fingers at other people if I'm gonna take this swing.
So what was the process like? Because your first film, I think it was your first film, was Safety Not Guaranteed.
That's Jason Wright.
Sorry?
Thank You for Smoking was Jason Wright.
Yes, that's what I was sort of.
He's very talented.
How do you jump from a small film like that to a major blockbuster? What is that like, even on just a technical and a writing process and just even a technical organizational process? Like, it's got to be vastly different.
It is and it isn't. It's interesting how, in the end, and I'm sure a lot of you made films as well, with your friends or even in school, and the very core of it is still a group of people together trying to make something feel real. And it's a cinematographer and actors and a writer and a director and a crew, and so there are concentric circles that go out forever on a big movie, and there are more trucks and there's more lights, but in the end it's still a small group of people trying to make it feel real. And in a lot of ways, it's a bit easier because you're not as rushed. I mean, when you make an independent film, every idea that you have, everything you come up with is immediately deemed unaffordable. Whereas on a movie like this, it's pretty much the limits are whatever the limits of your imagination are. And so for us to be able to have that reach and no, listen, the thing's going to come out of the water, it's going to eat a shark, and then all the people are going to go down underwater and see it finish the shark. And I mean, this is in an independent film, they would be like, all right, well, there's the door, and with something like this, we can do it. And so it was kind of liberating in a lot of ways. And I'm actually now I'm doing a small film again. I'm starting production next week on a film in New York that's like an $11 million movie. Wow. It's a small film, and yet I see the kinds of boundaries that are set around us, and that we just are constantly looking for how we can afford to do the very limited numbers of things. It's just a bunch of people in various rooms talking, like essentially.
That was one of my things about Jurassic Park, is you're InGen, or it wasn't InGen, that was a company, or was it?
InGen, yeah.
InGen. That was a company that really needed to have more meetings. Just safety meetings, and let's think about what we should do if this happens.
Right.
So absolutely. More terrible infrastructure in Japan.
So one question is that the Expanse has already been it's been screening a couple of places. The pilot first couple episodes have been screening for conventions. And
no, just the pilot.
Okay, just the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's already been, I think it's probably not hyperbolic to say that it's probably one of the most anticipated shows this year.
I read that.
All right.
It's true. They say
I hope you live up to it. See, now you have expectations you have to live
So
up to.
it's looking to be quite good, and Jurassic World did really well at the box office. So now how do you sort of steel yourself against more and bigger and better, and let's do more special effects, and let's just pump more money into it so that it looks it looks bigger, and there's more explosions and more action. And it seems to be whenever you have that happen to a film, you lose what made the first one great. So what do you do to make sure that doesn't happen, or is there anything you can do against it?
I think we've learned that. I feel like as moviegoers, we've learned that lesson that that was what Jurassic World was about, like bigger, louder, more teeth. Like that doesn't necessarily work, and oftentimes it can turn into kind of a numbing experience. And so we're writing Jurassic World 2 right now, Derek and I, and in constructing it, it's not about making it bigger, it's about making it deeper and more thoughtful, and trying to take what we've built and not go to another level of spectacle, but another level of really exploring the limits of the world that was created a long time ago. And Jurassic Park is a very limited environment of the movie. It's a couple people on an island with a theme park that's in a beta test. And then in this one, we got to have a large number of people still on an island with theme park that's fully functional. And I find that there's so many themes and so many routes that we can travel, and the way that we treat animals on the planet, the way that we have used them in medicine and in war, and we have this rich history of treating animals horribly, like throughout our existence, and these creatures we brought back and don't belong here. And so I think there's in the model of the great sequels of Godfather 2 and Empire Strikes Back, that those films are just deeper films. They're not necessarily bigger films.
Yeah. Now, how does it feel to be joining the Star Wars franchise? I have to ask you a little bit about that.
Sure.
So I saw that you have you're starting your research. I saw your picture online, and so it's like drinking from a fire hose, I imagine.
It is. It's an absolute joy in the most innocent, childlike way on one side, and then on the other hand, I have a job and I that I need to deliver on, and to be able to walk into, obviously, I can't talk about anything, and yet my experience in being able to see what JJ is doing, and then in talking and working with Ryan and seeing what that film is going to be, and I just, as a fan, I'm so excited about what is being built here, and what Gareth is doing, and also and Phil and Chris, and it is a great time to be a Star Wars fan.
Mm-hmm. I do have one thing I have to ask is if you raise your right hand. No, can't do that. No, you.
Me?
Yeah, I solemnly swear.
Okay.
No, I'm talking to you.
I don't know if I'm going to repeat this. What is it?
Not to use Jar Jar Binks.
Here's what I'll say about that. Whether I personally do not plan to use Jar Jar Binks, but I will say that I think it's important that we recognize that every generation has their own mythology that they love and that they care about, and just because certain iterations of various things weren't like the ones we loved when we were kids, or we don't think they're as good, it's important for us to acknowledge there is a whole generation that loves those films and cares about those films, and we shouldn't say that they have bad taste just because we are older and wiser.
In fact, there was something you said at the screening in Los Angeles that I thought was really great. It was something about Amblin. You said that Amblin was movies made by. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, movies for adults made by children.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I saw E.T. recently, and that's very true. That is an amazing movie that holds up. Again,
yeah,
sorry
those
to get
films
you off
are
Star Wars.
No, I mean those films are incredible, and to be able to be part of that family, and it very much is a family. Frank and Kathy and Stephen, and the Star Wars family as well. I mean, these are people who deeply care about this mythology and recognize how important it is. And I think we're just starting to understand how valuable all those stories were. I think there was this assumption that we'll make up new stories that are that good, every 5 to 10 years indefinitely. And I think now we're realizing, wow, like what was created, with Marvel and DC and those characters, and then with the Amblin films and with Star Wars, like these might be a little bit more special, a little bit more valuable in the context of actual storytelling history on the level of fables and myths and legends and fairy tales. And I think that we can't overestimate how valuable those are.
We have just a couple more minutes before we have to end. I guess, do you guys want to take some questions, or what are your thoughts?
Sure.
He really
Yes.
Yeah, I am a film student at Champlain College, and as of now, I am currently writing a screenplay for a small-scale drama, which again, which similar to yours, I plan to set in New York, but on a much smaller budget as yours, Colin. But I am also sort of writing, in the midst of barely writing an outline for a Transformers reboot, because unlike Michael Bay, I have a genuine connection to the Transformers franchise, because I saw it when I was 7 years old, and it just blew my mind.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the cartoon, not one episode of the cartoon, not the Michael Bay movie. So I am proud to say I may be among the last of my generation to have known about the cartoon series before the movies came out.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's exactly what I mean. I feel like it's just important to, however old anyone is, to be able to point to that and say, I don't particularly like that show, it's the movies that matter. Like, everybody has their own iteration of the mythology that matters to them.
And with Star Wars in particular, you have the original series, you have the prequel trilogy, then you have the cartoons, then you have the new cartoons, you have the books. So there's a whole world that's just, it's very, very rich, and you have generation after generation.
Not to mention the expanded universe, which
Yep.
was wiped clean for the sequels.
Yep.
Right.
So right over there.
Can you guys describe your writing process, your creative process, like on a daily basis if you're working on a project?
Yeah, what do you?
A lot of internet.
Don't tell them about
procrastination.
Wikipedia.
No, I mean, some days it comes easy, and some days it's really hard. But basically, it's sitting down in a chair and facing a blank page is really hard, at least for me. But so I remember during the writing strike, somebody wrote, "I hate writing, but I love having written," and I think that describes it pretty much for me. So I don't know if that explains our process, but maybe Colin has a better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. The times when I'm doing actual screenwriting are much rarer than it used to be. It's what I would do all day, every day, for more than a decade. I started right out of high school, and I wrote every single day through college. And when I was selling screenplays, and before I sold anything, when I was trying to sell them, that entire time I never stopped. And now when I get to do, I actually enjoy it a bit more because I don't do it every day. And so when I get to write, a screenplay, it's exciting and fun. And but what I get to do now is, because I have a writing partner, I'm able to build stories, and I built Jurassic World 2, and now I have this notebook, and I'm able to just be imaginative and think, outside the boundaries of what I think the boundaries are in these worlds, and that's what's, I think, so important about both of them is in this particular case, George Lucas created what he did by having a crazy vast imagination and an ability to build worlds. Like, I think no one that's never even tried to do it, that guy. And so to be able to find that, and I think you do it as well, like you have to find a level of imagination that you don't necessarily have on a daily basis, because you're hanging out with your family and your kids, and you're like, what are we gonna have for lunch? And then you have to sit down and like, all right, now my mind has to go, galaxy size.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like if you sit down to write and suddenly you have a tax issue or something that you have to deal with, that can take half a day to just get your mind back into into space where you can. So it's interesting how those kind of. There's also something strange that happens when you sort of dip into storyland, is that time really has no meaning. You look down and then you suddenly look up and it's 2.5 hours later. So there's a strange. That's really where you want to get to. Where you're not coming from your intellect, but you're really coming from your gut. And people do that in various forms, either through medication, through wine, through Chuck Palahniuk, one of my favorite writers, just stays up for 3 days, and he so he can't really think anymore, and he's just kind of vomiting it out from here. So I think for us that was a real sort of like, hey, don't try to write from here, and that's that's part of the reason. The way we work anyway is to try and vomit it out as quickly as you can, and never edit yourself, and you sort of get this fatigue where the words are coming out of you and you're like, this is shit, this is crap, and then you look at it later and you go, oh, there's actually something here, there's a bit of soul here, it's not totally right, but
yeah, you have to allow yourself to write stuff that just looks and sounds crazy at first.
Yeah.
If it isn't, you've probably seen it before. There's so many things we've seen that it should just feel bananas when you read it back to yourself at first.
Yeah. A couple more questions.
First, I really just have to kind of draw attention to my shirt, because it's Optimus Prime training the Dinobots, just like in Jurassic World. So I figured you'd get a kick out of that.
Yeah,
I sure do. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. You are a legend. And my question is for Colin in regards to episode 9. I know you really can't talk too much about it, but is there constriction in the sense of having to come on the 9th film and the 3rd in this current trilogy, versus being able to tell a story that you want to tell within the Star Wars universe?
No, man, not at all. Each of us are, JJ and Ryan and I have really been given a tremendous amount of freedom to tell the stories we want to tell, and I have never felt this amount of creative freedom in the ability to build something, and you'd think it would be daunting in a lot of ways, and I think that all I can do is do what both of those guys have done, and what everyone has done is just completely dive in and just try to blow my own mind with crazy ideas, and then try to find a way to make that all work into something that makes a lick of sense, and that's the one thing I love about the original trilogy and what George did is those. If you tried to pitch Star Wars to somebody who had never heard of it before, like, well, it's about a guy who can do magic, and his father could do magic, but he's part robot, and then he's got a buddy whose friend drives a spaceship, but he's kind of like a dog, and like, what are you talking about? And they fight with light swords, but then you see it, and it's the most emotionally rich, universe that's imaginable, and you can connect to it on a fundamental human level, and that's why it's amazing. And so it's being able to find. It's also the movie I'm doing right now is it's a very deeply emotional film. And in choosing a movie to do between these, I chose something that was emotional because Star Wars is really one of the very few kinds of movies where characters can reach the point of emotion where they can just be like, no, and you're gonna be in it, and so I went with the deepest emotion I could find as preparation.
What is your next movie going to be about, or can you say?
It's called The Book of Henry, and I think it's kind of a family drama that turns into a suspense thriller. Valerie. It's really hard to explain, but Naomi Watts stars in it. We start shooting it next week, and these two boys, and it's. I just love it. It's just an incredible script it's 20 years old. This guy wrote it 20 years ago, and I found it. I've been working with him on it for a long time, and it's just a great story.
Very nice.
Wow,
Nate, you had a question?
I just had a quick question for Hawk. Could you talk a little bit about the process of how you get work handed to you? Like, did you read Children of Men and say, I want to adapt this, or was this something that was kind of handed to you and like?
No, it had been knocking around town for a long time, and somebody had written a draft of it that did not go, and it was just a broken piece of material, and we got passed through our agent this book, and we read it, and we go, wow, this is totally impossible. And then the more Mark and I talked, the more we realized, hey, you could capture parts of the book, and it's sort of that's where the Casablanca thing, some of that's still in there with the transit papers and stuff. So it came to us. It was a broken piece of material that nobody wanted, and those are the things you get when you're starting out. Is what I was saying earlier. Is that you get all the stuff that nobody wants, and in some way that's good because those impossible stories really train you for. It's a strange thing in the business because, doing Angels and Demons or the Da Vinci Code. You're following the book, but they get a top. They get Steve's Alien or somebody to do those, and the ones that are really broken and really hard who could use that experience. Steve's Alien. You get guys like us. Starting out, so it's a strange kind of thing like that, but it's a really good thing for starting screenwriters to work on things that are sort of impossible because you really have to rely on you can't just go to the book, you got to invent it. And
starting out, Oscar nominated amateur.
Wow, that was it.
Started.
I guess we'll have one last question.
So first thing, don't Michael Bay your stuff ever. So explosions and blinding light, and then the second part is for Hawk. For Children of Men, what was your favorite cinematic sequence?
Oh God, I think certainly that whole the whole thing that took place in the sort of the refugee. It's not really a refugee camp, but it's in the closed off kind of. That was just the adrenaline was it was staggering. I just remember and it was. Here's an example of how this went. Like. I'm not sure if the baby. I think it might be in the book, or maybe it isn't. When they hold the baby up and the fighting stops, and so in our draft, that's what he does, and the fighting just stops, and everybody's just in total wonder of this this child. What they did was turn the screw a little bit more, which is the fighting stops momentarily, and then as soon as the baby's out of view, they start fighting again, that's us. We for a little while things change us, like the picture of the kid, on the beach in Europe, it's horrifying, and then slowly, we go back to our old Alaska. So it was things like that. It was really intriguing. They took, and just turned the screw here and there, and So but certainly that sequence was. I just remember being in, just you were there. He put you really into the conflict.
It was intense.
It was, yeah.
I like the band sequence. That was a really good one where it was like just one shot.
Oh yeah, with the car. Well, that was very shocking.
Well, the
Yeah,
one that he was describing, that's also one shot too. It's and he Alfonso, is it Alfonso?
Alfonso, yeah.
Yeah, he's known for doing those. His latest film, Gravity, there was not a lot of shots in it. It was a lot of just single camera stuff. So I guess one last question before we let you go. You guys both had worked as screenwriters. What is it like to see you got words on a page, you hit final draft, and then a couple of months, years later, you finally have the cinematic version. Did you ever have points where you're like, oh, shoot, I should change that a little bit, or is it just like, wow, I did this?
From the Expanse, looking at it, all I can see are the seams. I can't see. I'm like, nobody's going to like this. This is shit. But when people see it, when we took it to Comic Con, it was so great because, the uninitiated are really watching something that, you can't see anymore. And so it was a great validation that they really loved it. And the flaws that we saw, they didn't, they didn't register. So I'm sure you.
You always. It was a little just because I lived with it all the way up to the very end, and I think probably the Expanse is the first time you guys are going to be able to live with something being in
very
control
true.
of it
Yes.
at the very
yes.
end. And so they're really, I haven't seen the movie in a couple months, and it'll be interesting. I'm sure when it comes out on Blu-ray, I'll watch it again because my kid will insist that we see it, and my son's great because he makes me feel good. And when I showed it to him, we saw it in the theater, and I was like, so what do you think? Papa worked pretty hard, and he's like, it's the greatest movie ever made. All right.
I think that's a good place to end. Thank you everybody very much for coming out. Actually, before we end, tell us about when we can see this Magical Expanse series.
Yeah, so it comes out December 14th on Sci-Fi.
And 15th too.
Yep, so it's episode 1 on the 14th, episode 2 on the 15th, and then it goes to a weekly schedule.
Yep. And then, do you have anything coming up that we should be paying attention to?
My Book of Henry is going to be released in 2016. We don't know exactly when. And then, the Star Wars. I'm sure you guys will check that out. And I love the ringtones here, by the way. This is the best. Like, the only place where you can go, just like, most impressive. Like, pretty awesome. Looks like, look what we have here.
I
Cool.
think hopefully this isn't an
What's up,
assassination.
fellas?
Yeah.
Get them.
Yeah, what's going on? Are they going to come in?
They're gonna-
All right. I guess that's it. We're done.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Of course.
This is a picture line.
Were you doing a picture or something?
You mind?
Of course.
I guess you're going to be saying